Hey gang, I'm back. Even with my incredibly hectic schedule, I'm still trying to find time to make content. This week, yet another series of questions for atheists.
What's going on, guys? This is Ashlee Keyton, reporting for duty in the flesh. How art thou? I have 10 questions for atheists, agnostics, and people who believe in a higher power but don't, for some reason, want to call it God.
Well, I guess that's me. I'm both agnostic because I have no evidence for a deity, and atheistic since I have no reason to accept the claims that there is one. Mostly from the lack of evidence I mentioned about 5 seconds ago. So, I matched 2 out of 3 of his criteria, which isn't bad. Okay, it's only like 66%, but still a passing grade. Anyway, where were we?
Here we go. First question. Does objective evil exist? I'm just waiting on you to answer the question.
Okay, so first off, do you understand how videos work? Unless this was a live stream, people aren't going to answer you in the middle of your recording. Second, do you really think you'll get a better reaction with an extreme close-up?
Extreme close-up! Wah! Wah!
Ha! Classic. Anyway, before we get to asking if it exists, we really need to define what objective evil is. Now, as I understand it, an objective evil would be something that's wrongness is built into the universe itself, a basic fundamental principle. That doesn't appear to be the case with morals, though. The universe doesn't seem to care if anybody does anything wrong. Personally, I break down my thoughts on evil like this. I have empathy for other humans. I don't like to be harmed, so I don't think other people should be harmed for no reason either. What I consider evil is massive harm done with absolutely no good coming out of it. But that isn't an objective truth. If things were objectively good or evil, then everybody would consider the same things to be evil. I say that the Holocaust was evil because of the intense harm inflicted on so many people, specifically murdering them. Others, like, say, some of these guys, would probably think it was a good thing. Also, in case it isn't clear about my feelings towards them, fuck those guys. Anyway, since what is considered evil versus what is considered acceptable depends on who you ask, I would have to say that objective evil does not exist, as our morals are subjective and change from person to person.
Number 2, can you define objective evil for me?
Well, I believe I just did, or at least my understanding of it. You might want to reverse those questions, but hey, that's just an editing suggestion.
Number 3, and this one's my favorite. Have you ever honestly tried Jesus? He's all right. We're not talking about the biblical text or Christians. Have you ever tried God out? Sincerely. And I'm not assuming that you haven't. I just want to hear different answers on this to see who has really tried Jesus out.
If you just want to know my past, sure. Where I grew up, morning prayer was mandatory in public schools, and we often started our day with a Bible reading. So yes, I was indoctrinated into accepting that Christianity was true, even if, ironically, I found out years later that my parents weren't believers either. So, I accepted the resurrection of Jesus as a real event until I started to think critically about that story and realized there was no reason to accept it.
Number 4, what would be, in your view, a better explanation for how the world came to be about? The Big Bang? Or God? What makes the most sense? Logically, consistently, theoretically, cosmologically.
Okay, let's start at the beginning. The Big Bang didn't create the world, or even create the universe. The Big Bang is the rapid expansion and cooling of the universe. We don't know what caused it, and we might never know. But we know it happened. The reason I accept the Big Bang as an actual event is that the evidence we have backs it up, and we can consistently observe the universe to see that evidence. The cosmic background radiation, the fact that every galaxy appears to be moving apart from one another, and the amount of found in the universe all point to a rapidly expanding, then cooling universe. I do not. Still not sure how to pronounce that right. However, we have no evidence that points to a God or not. So, for all your points, logically, consistently, theoretically, and cosmologically, there are reasons to accept the Big Bang, and there are no reasons, at least none that I have found, to accept God.
Number 5, is believing in God an inconsistent view, or do you just not like it?
To start, remember that being consistent doesn't necessarily mean true. People can be very consistent with their thoughts on God. God has created the universe and did so in such a way to perfectly hide his handiwork is technically an internally consistent view in that you can't disprove it.
You are technically correct. The best kind of correct.
It's just that it has no evidence to back it up, so I reject that claim. And it doesn't matter what I, or really anybody, likes about the idea of a God. I could absolutely hate the idea of a God, and it wouldn't mean that one didn't exist. Honestly, there are days where I would love there to be a reason to the universe, some kind of grand plan to explain what we're all going through. I just have no reason to accept that there is one.
Number 6, do all humans understand morality the same way, and some just choose to act against that good morality?
Morality changes from person to person. What one person considers moral, another would consider immoral. For instance, I believe that it's moral to let people love each other, regardless of their gender, ethnicity, orientation, or identity. Whereas others think that the government should strictly interfere with the private lives of its citizens, and only approved couples should have rights. I generally side with the let people live their lives crowd.
And number 7, how can we know who is right? How can we possibly know who has the correct answer?
Right about what? Right about morality from your previous question? Again, that's a subjective thing, but my morality generals into reducing the harm around us. Right about the nature of the universe? Well, for that I rely on evidence to determine what is true. I have no evidence for things like gods, the tooth fairy, or an unmoderated internet chat room that doesn't eventually turn into a cesspool of trolls drowning each other out, so I dismiss the claims of people who say such things are real. Does it mean that I'm right? No. New evidence could always come about to change my mind. But, in general, relying on evidence is the best way to know what's right.
Number 8, and I know the answer to this question, but I want to know your answer. Does the Bible speak for every person who calls themselves a Christian?
I'm not even sure I understand that question. How does the Bible speak for anybody? Can you please explain?
Let me explain.
Thank you.
You have certain people that act ungodly, in my view, and do some things that I would say God never told them to do. That say they're Christian, that believe in the Bible. There was actually something brought up the last time I did 10 Questions for Atheists, and someone responded, and they said that a lot of Christians worked with Hitler, and, a lot of Catholics, and those are not Christians. But that's my view. What would you say? Let me calm down.
Okay, this is badly worded. When I first listened to it, I thought he was saying that Christians who worked with Hitler were not Christians. But researching his other videos, I found a somewhat anti-Catholic bias showing up, especially his ex-Catholic to Christian video, so maybe he's saying that Catholics aren't Christians. If that's the case, that really isn't a question for atheists. We reject the idea of any god and religion, not just your specific sect of your particular deity. I really don't care about the issues you may have with the hierarchy of the Catholic Church, and how they need to go through intermediaries to speak to God. That's for you and them to deal with, not my issue. I find both sects, let's say, equally plausible. I dismiss your beliefs and their beliefs equally. And quite frankly, it's not my job to police your religion. If, on the other hand, the statement was about Germans who worked with and were members of the Nazi Party, why wouldn't I consider them Christians? They believed in the resurrection of Jesus, and that such a belief was the way to heaven, which, as I understand it, is the most basic requirement of Christianity. But what does that have to do with a deity existing? People doing terrible things while believing in a deity doesn't make a bit of difference in determining if that deity actually exists or not.
Does the Bible speak for every single Christian? Does every Christian represent the Bible?
I let the Bible speak for itself. is there any evidence for the claims your holy text makes? Since I haven't been presented with any, why should I believe the claims in the Bible when what they assert has nothing to validate said claims, or the claims of any Holy Scripture when it comes to their deity or deities? How people behave based on their beliefs doesn't make a difference in the validity of those beliefs. I can see a huge problem when a religion's adherents do terrible things to others because they believe that's what their religion says to do. And I will, and have, called that out as a problem with holding some religious beliefs. But honestly, that doesn't make one bit of difference for the claims of a religion being true or not.
9. Is murder against the innocent wrong? And why? You could turn all of these questions to me, and I don't mind giving my answer. But please do not dismiss the question.
To me, yes, it is. As I've mentioned before, my moral system is fairly simple. Don't harm others unless there's some corresponding good that it does. For instance, my usual example is don't stab somebody with a sharp piece of metal. However, giving a vaccine by stabbing them with a piece of metal is a good thing. Now, normally I would add, and if you haven't gotten vaccinated yet, please do so. But frankly, this far into the pandemic, if you haven't gotten the shot yet, I'm not going to be able to convince you. But yes, murder in general does harm others by, killing them. And fortunately, enough of us believe that murder is wrong that there are laws punishing, and therefore hopefully preventing, those who don't think it's so bad from committing it.
Number 10, what is your confirmation and foundation for truth?
Evidence. If something can be shown to be true, then I'll accept it. I think that's the bare minimum needed as a foundation for our understanding of the world. Now, as I've often said, I could be wrong, and if new evidence comes to support a claim that I've dismissed in the past, then I will willingly change my mind, including evidence for your, or honestly any, deity.